So before I get underway with my professional, serious introduction, I just want to note, I always encourage our classes and students to do like a little groove in that groovy countdown, and Angelica and Levi absolutely killed it that time. So way to go in the background for grooving at that. That was awesome. All right, time to be serious. My name's Jesse. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And if you're joining us for the first time, like quite a few of you are today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you're catching us on an exciting day for two big reasons. Number one, this is February. This is our entire month solely showcasing the most amazing women in science and exploration on planet Earth. We've got shark people, earthquake people, deep sea people. We were live in the South Pole yesterday. It's been a wild ride. We've got like 40 more broadcasts to come. Just incredible women from all around the world, and everything we do goes to our YouTube channel so you can explore and discover even more there. And number two, this is our third program in a week that is either on a ship or talking about an epic research expedition. Now, the amazing ladies of the USGS reached out to us to say, hey, we're back from a super cool expedition off Hawaii getting deep sea sediment cores from underneath the ocean, and we want to talk about them and share them in our lab. And we, of course, jumped at the chance to do that because Hawaii is one of the most remote places on this planet. I think, as Canadians, Americans, a lot of us were like, oh, Hawaii. Hawaii's in the middle of nowhere. Look at the oceans. Look at the map of planet Earth, and you'll see that it's one of the most remote places anywhere. And we send ships there to go and explore the seafloor and do all sorts of really cool science, particularly on this expedition. Some of the most amazing, it's basically the super team of scientists all got together to do some really, really cool research. So today, we're going to explore that together in the lab, learn a lot, have a lot of fun. This is going to be super interactive, so please do share questions in the chat on YouTube, StreamYard, anytime. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. But without further ado, I'm going to zip it. Not about me. Kira and Katlin, welcome to the broadcast, and take us away. So nice to have you back.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Jesse mentioned, we just got back from an expedition in Hawaii, which is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and we don't always have the best internet. So we thought that it might be fun to show you guys the lab and some of the samples we brought back instead of trying to live stream from the middle of the ocean. But we'll share a little bit about our project, and then we're going to give you a tour of this really cool sediment lab. Kira and I split open a deep sea sediment core this morning. We haven't actually opened it and seen the inside, so we're going to do that together towards the end of our show.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I was the chief scientist for the expedition, so I got to be in charge, which is a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun, and it means that I get to work with a lot of different scientists. So I'll tell you a little bit about why we were there. We were studying a region of the deep ocean called the Abyssal Plains. Abyss, it has that very cool sound, and it's really like the deepest, flattest parts of the deep ocean. And they are some of the least explored habitats on Earth. And our group specifically works on deep sea minerals. So we work on kind of rocks and minerals that are forming in the modern ocean basin. So things, if you've ever heard of manganese nodules, ferromanganese crusts, we study sulfide minerals that are forming near deep sea hydrothermal vents. And we learn all about how they form, what are they made out of, do they have any interesting minerals or metals inside of them. And so in this particular expedition, we thought there might be manganese nodules there. So this is an example of a manganese nodule. This is a really big one. They're not always this big. They can be quite small, but they grow around a little nucleus, and then they grow layer by layer. And nodules grow about 5 to 10 millimeters per million years. So every million years or so, they're recording ocean chemistry as they grow out and out and out. So kind of like a tree ring records information, a nodule is super similar. So we were exploring this area to look for nodules, to look at deep sea sedimentation, to look for what kinds of microbes and small tiny animals, all the way up through larger animals like worms, and we were also studying all of the water up above. So we were about 6,000 meters deep, which is multiple miles down to the bottom of the ocean. And we were studying all of the water columns, sampling seawater and doing plankton net tows, and really trying to learn about this whole ecosystem from the very deep bottom of the seafloor, looking for minerals and animals all the way up to the surface ocean. So it's a really cool place to work.
I have a few questions on this actually to begin. So these nodules, because that's like, I've never seen one cut in half like that. That's super cool. Are these literally just like pebbles that are on the seafloor? Like as you're going along, do you just find like fields of these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. They have this really magical ability these large deposits of them, they will actually be sustained at the sea floor. So even though some material is raining down all the time, little bits of sediment and dead animals and things and poop and things like that are falling down as ocean sediments, they remain at the surface. And so they can just be these fields of little black spheres just covering vast areas of the deep ocean.
And we know that we're there because are they sort of spread all over the oceans, or did you go specifically where you went because you know there's a big deposit of them, so to speak?
Oh, that's a great question. There are a few places in the global oceans where we do know that there are really, really big deposits. And there is one just southeast of Hawaii. And that was part of the reason why we went to this region is we nobody had ever sampled them that close to Hawaii, but we knew they were just, further south and east. And we wanted to see, does that deposit continue into the waters near Hawaii? So we knew that some geologic criteria was there for them to possibly exist, but we were exploring somewhere completely new. No one had been there before. So we're kind of testing our own hypotheses of like, do minerals occur here under these conditions?
Yeah. So I want to harp on something just very particular. You talked about them growing very, very slowly and giving sort of a record of past climate. So some of our students might be familiar with ice cores, where we can go and you can literally catch the trapped air pockets in an ice core from 20, 30,000 years ago and be like, oh, this is what the climate was like. Can you do that with something on a million-year time scale, like a manganese nodule? Like what are you extracting from these?
Oh, yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, manganese nodules and crusts that grow on underwater mountains or seamounts, they're actually really famous for being able to do that kind of paleo-oceanographic work. So that's what we call past ocean science. So every time that a layer grows, it records the seawater chemistry for that time period. So yes, scientists do go in layer by layer and take isotope measurements, and they can learn about how much carbon was in the ocean at the time, ocean temperature, changes in the metal composition of the ocean over time. So they're a really amazing record of seawater chemistry over the millions of years that they grow.
Yeah.
Kira's holding a time capsule in her hand.
Yeah.
A lot of information in that rock.
This is the thing, is that like this didn't need to be the case on Earth. Like it's really cool that we have some living things like trees that we can get tree rings from, or ice cores that are a few 100,000 years back, but like something that you can literally record. Like this is when we talk about scientists, when scientists talk about, 20 million years ago, this was the CO2 in the atmosphere. We know that, or in the ocean, we know that from things like this, which is crazy that those exist and crazy that we can go and get them and extract so much information. So I'll leave you to share with us a little more. I just wanted to give that in context for everybody because it's very neat.
Yeah, totally. One other really fun thing that crusts, because they are on the million year time scale, there are also scientists who study particles of space dust or asteroids. And actually these rocks, because they're sitting in a very quiet ocean environment for millions of years, a lot of space chemistry can be done using these really old rocks on the seafloor. So if you're into the history of space, that can be used with these minerals as well. So I'll let Katlin talk a little bit more about the box coring that we did to get these cool sediments we're going to show you guys.
Yeah, so as Kira mentioned, we were working at depths like 5,500 meters, a little bit deeper, which is about 3.5 miles. It's very, very deep in the ocean. And it's, we have a number of different tools that we can use to work that deep in the ocean. Sometimes we use submarines. Sometimes we use these really cool robots called ROVs. For this project, we were using a different type of tool called a box corer. And so Jesse has a video that he can share of the work that we did at sea. The box corer is this big metal empty box, and we send it all the way down to the seafloor. And when it rests on the seafloor, that box sinks into the mud. There are two jaws that close and capture a little piece of the seafloor, kind of like a cube. So we get the mud, we get anything on top of the mud, a little bit of water, and then we have to haul that box core all the way back up on the vessel. It's really exciting because it comes up as a closed box and we don't know if it's full. Sometimes it's empty, sometimes it doesn't work, or maybe the seafloor is too hard and it wasn't able to push down and collect that sample. So it's really exciting on deck. Everybody's kind of gathered around waiting for us to undo the screws and take off the box and look and see what's inside. And that's how we collected samples for this project. So what we're doing this week in the lab is looking at the sediment cores. So we get this giant box of mud, and then we have a bunch of empty plastic tubes, and we push the tubes down into the mud and we pull them out, and we get this cylinder of material. And we kind of seal the top and the bottom, and we ship it back to USGS. And what's been happening this week is we're slicing those cores in half, and we're opening them up. And kind of similar to getting history from a rock, we can get some history from sediment cores too. So sediment in the ocean is formed with whatever kind of particles and stuff is raining down deep through the water column. So that can be particles, it can be organic material like dead animals or animal poop. All that stuff is slowly making its way down and then resting on the seafloor, and that becomes sediment. And that's happening over hundreds of thousands to millions of years. So the deeper you get into a sediment core, the older the core is. We're dealing with cores about this big, so they're pretty young, but there are other types of coring tools where you can go really, really deep in the sediment layer and get even more history.
Very cool.
We can pause here for some questions, or
I was going to bring up the sediment core processing video if this is a good time for it, or we could talk about that a little later if you'd like as well. While I'm bringing this up too, I just want to note, I don't know if anyone's commented that all of you in the orange helmets at night with the big hooks is really reminiscent of Jurassic Park at the beginning. So thank you for that in my day.
We watched that movie on the ship.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sticking our arms deep into the sediment.
Here we are.
We work at all times of the day when we're on a vessel. So sometimes working in the middle of the night, sometimes in the middle of the day. We have all these different scientists that come on board. Some of them are biologists, some of them are chemists, some are microbiologists, and we're collecting all different types of data so we can understand the seafloor as an ecosystem.
Super, this is really highlighting that, like, if you like playing in the mud as a student at whatever age, you can just do that for a living and end up being in a cool USGS sediment core lab, because fantastic. So cool. Out of curiosity, so we will dive in with questions. Please do feel free to share on YouTube. We've got a whole bunch there already, so I'll dive in with that. Lavi will come to you in a minute. Carrie, welcome in on your first time. If you have questions on behalf of your class, we'll come to you. But what's the most valuable thing you found, or have you found any valuable things while you're on an expedition? This could be sort of treasure or scientific treasure, however you want to phrase it.
Ooh, that's a really...
My favorite thing that we found on this expedition was something called a carnivorous sponge. Kind of looked like a Venus flytrap from the Mario video games. And we didn't really find a lot of life on the seafloor in these samples. We expected to see a lot of different worms, and there wasn't a lot of life, but in one of the boxes there was this carnivorous sponge. Sponges usually filter water and eat particles, but a carnivorous sponge can eat little things. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, that in this part of the seafloor where there's not a lot of life, there's not a lot of food, there's this one carnivorous sponge that was surviving down there.
So I want to harp on this for a second, because I'm a biologist by background. I have like many dozens of like giant books of all the animals, all the creatures in the world. I love sponges, and I've never heard of this. And I just looked it up, and it's one of the freakiest looking things I've ever seen. And everyone should look up our carnivorous sponge, because they totally rock. So thank you for that, my day. I've never run across that as a term ever in 33 years of loving nature. So very cool. Let's see. Mrs. Connor's class wants to know, is there any evidence of volcanic activity in the younger cores? Do you get any records of volcanoes and stuff that you take up?
Oh, that's a really great question. Yeah, so in some regions, we're studying active hydrothermal vents, which is a little bit different from a volcanic eruption, but it is magma that's coming up from the center of the earth and heating up seawater and creating these deep sea vents. In this particular region near Hawaii, where, as you know, or maybe you don't, that the island is a volcanic chain that is forming from a hotspot volcano. So all of the islands of Hawaii are increasing in age as you go towards the northwest. and there is a new volcano that's forming. We were about 200 miles offshore of the big island of Hawaii. So we were far from that active hotspot activity, but there are a lot of seamounts in that region. And there's a lot of open questions as to how recent any volcanism was in these underwater seamounts that are forming from the volcanism in the region. It's an active question for us, though. In some of our cores, we did find some, most of them are kind of brownish, grayish mud, and there are some dark gray layers in a few of the cores. And we're going to use mineralogy and chemistry to figure out if any of those have any volcanic ash in them.
Yeah.
Sometimes grayish sediment can indicate that. So great question, and something we're really excited to figure out as we split these cores open and take a look.
Amazing. Super cool. Thanks for the question, guys. All right, we're going to take 2 more, and then we'll let you explore the lab a little more. I'm going to head to Levi in North Topsail Beach. Come on in and take us away. Hey.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good.
Good.
Awesome. So I was wondering, what kind of microbes are I finding in the abysmal plains?
Ooh, that's a great question.
That's a good question.
Well, we work in this particular expedition. We were really lucky to have a colleague that is from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She's our microbiology expert. And she's still actively working on those samples. It takes a lot of work to filter sediment for microbial DNA and then sequence that DNA and then compare it with a big library. So that's a really great question. It takes sometimes up to a year or more to really go through all the processes to get that data. But in abyssal plains in general, we have a lot of different kinds of microbial communities. Sometimes you can get ones that are their job is to help use different metals like manganese cycling. They play a really important role in carbon cycling in the deep ocean. There's a lot of different kinds of bacteria actually living in the deep sea, and that's a very active area of research. Great question. Maybe Caitlin has some more.
Another type of mineral that we study on the seafloor are sulfides, and those can form at places where you have hot fluid coming out of the seafloor. And there you have these really cool microbes that can do something called chemosynthesis. So these are microbes that can make their own organic molecules using energy from chemical reactions. And they get those chemicals from the hot fluid coming out of the seafloor. So just like a plant or a plankton on the surface of the ocean can do photosynthesis, they use energy from the sun. That's where the photo comes from. So use energy from the sun to make organic molecules. You have these microbes in the deep ocean where it's very, very dark and it's very, very cold. And they don't have any sunlight. They don't have sunlight to use as an energy source, but they have evolved to use these chemicals around them, to use those chemical reactions as an energy source to make their own sugar molecules. Those are my favorite type of deep sea microbes.
I want to harp on something for our students here for a second, because on the microbe note, like literally, if you go into your backyard, wherever you are in this planet, and you were to really, really assess your bacteria, you would find new bacteria that have never been described before in science, much less something on the seafloor off the coast of Hawaii. Like, it's just endless discovery when we do deep sea expeditions. And on the chemosynthesis note, like, this was like totally novel to scientists when we found this, and it was through deep sea expeditions that we found these ecosystems of chemosynthetic things in like the 70s, which I know that if you're like in grade 3 or 4 sounds like ancient history right now, but is like insanely recent by science standards. Like, all scientists are like still think this is like yesterday, and they're like, holy geez, this is the coolest thing ever. So we're learning so much, and we have so many expeditions now that are going out to ocean basins all around the world to discover new things. So it's like the golden age of discovery. If you're like Caitlin and Kira, like, it's the coolest time ever to be in this, all of it. So thanks for that, Levi. One more question. See, you got them all riled up, you two, and that's a problem, because that means we have a lot before we get to explore the next bit. But Carrie, so our Ottawa Catholic District School Board group wants to know, how did you get into this job? For our students that might want to be you when they grow up, what would you recommend? And tell us a little about your story.
You go.
Okay, I loved the science fair when I was a kid. I did a lot of science fair projects. I'm from Ohio. I got to compete in the Ohio State Science Fair. And I knew from doing the science fair that I really liked science. I liked going to the library and doing research and coming up with the question. And I also really liked being outside, hiking and swimming. And so I always picked science fair projects that were focused on the environment. I would do research, I would come up with a question, and then I would go out and collect samples and data. I really liked that from a young age, and I studied environmental sciences in college. There's no ocean in Ohio. I didn't grow up going to the beach or going to the ocean. I didn't know that oceanography was a job, but I knew I liked science. I knew I liked being outside, and I was pursuing that in college, and I got a job in a lab that was going to sea, and it sounded so fun and so adventurous, and so I took the job. And when I was a sophomore in college, I got to go out on a research expedition, and that was it. I was hooked, and I've done it ever since.
Super cool. Yeah.
I'll share just briefly, I won't tell the whole story, but similarly, I grew up in Colorado. There are some people who work in oceanography that have their lives are based in the ocean, and they know from a young age that they want to work on ships and they want to do that. But if that's not you, like, you can still garner that interest, and you can still go work somewhere that is not where you grew up. If this is really interesting to you, I would say, like, I just always followed opportunities. Anytime that somebody said, hey, we need someone to help with this, if you say yes, like, you'll get into different opportunities. And someday, like, you could have never told me when I was a kid that I would be an oceanographer. So I studied biochemistry and a lot of different things. And the cool thing about the ocean is that it involves a lot of different kinds of science. You can study physics and study the ocean. You can study microbes and study the ocean. You can study rocks and study the ocean. It's a place where there's so much going on, and it's such an important part of our Earth that, a lot of times people only think about marine biologists that work on whales and dolphins, which are amazing animals, and that's an amazing science. But you can do a lot of different things, even engineering, working on ships and all these interesting vehicles we use to sample. There's just so many things happening in this really dynamic environment that if it's interesting to you at all, you can take it in a lot of different directions.
What beautiful stories. Thanks, you two. Well, I'm going to let you explore a little more, show us some of the cool stuff you have on the table and maybe that library, and then we'll dive in with some more questions. So feel free to start sharing questions in the chat, everyone. We'll come to our live classes, of course, but take us away and show us a little more of what you guys are working on.
Yeah, so we thought it would be fun to kind of show you guys our workflow. Kira's been really busy in the lab all week, cutting open the sediment cores and doing some subsampling. So I'm going to flip my camera. Welcome to the Sediment Core Lab. We're at USGS in Santa Cruz, California. All of our cores came back from the research cruise in November. This is a pretty short core. So we pull up that box of sediment, we push that tube in, we slip a cap on the bottom, a cap on the top, we tape it up for the ride home, and then it goes on this core cutting machine. And we're not going to cut on camera because it's very loud. We have all of our ear protection and our eye protection, but you can see this cool track. And then the orange things on the right and the left have blades. So when we're cutting, we turn those blades on. We have this giant wheel, so we can turn the wheel to move the blades, and they slice open that core on either side. Kira and I cut one this morning. We thought it'd be fun to open it up for you guys and see what's inside. So remember, when we see the box, we get to look down and we're seeing the surface, what the seafloor looked like. But when we push these cores in and then split them open, we get to take a look at those deeper layers of sediment. So we've cut through the plastic this morning. We slide these metal pieces in.
What? Stick together.
Did we do a good enough cut?
Maybe not.
This is half the fun. If you screwed up, that's kind of enjoyable for the broadcast too.
This looks like really sticky mud. Okay, so it looks like we cut through all of the plastic.
And we get to just slide this off and see the inside for the first time. Oops, it's kind of like...
This is a messy one. We have to do some work to clean it up.
Let's see how this half looks.
Yeah, maybe the other half is
And usually they're a lot thicker. Some of our cores came back pretty shallow. Also a pretty messy one. But that's part, it's like cracking it open for the first time. So we'll show you some cores that had a lot more layers. But that's an example of how we like split them open and kind of get that first reveal, which is really exciting.
So after we split them open, we clean them up, make them all nice and smooth. We're not going to go in this room with all of the caution signs because they're busy working in there. But we have some machines that can do CT scans, really nice images, collect a bunch of different type of data. So half of the core goes in there, and then half of the core comes over to this bench where we do some sub-sampling. So see how this one has a bunch of holes in it? These are different layers that we thought looked pretty cool and interesting. And what we do is we take a tool and we dig out some of that mud and we put it on these watch glasses to dry. Someone had a really good question about volcanic material. Do we see volcanic material in these cores?
Yeah.
Part of how we answer that question is we can scrape a layer that looks like it might be volcanic. We can dry it on that glass and we can crush up the dried sediment into a powder. And then that powder goes into machines that measure minerals and element concentrations. And that's how we can start to kind of get the answers to some of those questions. These cores are all from offshore Hawaii, but you might be noticing that they don't all look the same. Some of them are short, some of them are long, some of them have different shades of colors. I don't know how well it'll show up.
We see a little bit of the shading, but the green bit's the real thing. We already have questions about that. So if you want to dive in with that, this is really freaky and weird color.
This color?
Yeah.
That's actually, you know what that is? That's flower foam. But not all of the tools that we use in science and oceanography are fancy technical things. What works really well to keep the sediment in the tube is a chunk of flower foam that you would see in a flower shop. You normally stick stems in it. So that's one of our most important tools in this type of work. This is, my camera keeps flipping. This is my very favorite core from the cruise. This one looks very different, right?
Well, so we've got some kids already commenting, like it sort of looks like cement. So to an inexpert eye, like that one is a little bit different, and certainly how it's, it's very, very smooth, which is just how it was cut. But we've got a few different layers in there. But what are you seeing as an expert when you're looking at this, just without doing all the fancy things later on? What are you seeing?
This one, when we pulled up the box, we were very confused. It felt very fluffy. Normally we have hard mud. This was fluffy and light. The color was different. So we weren't sure what it was at first, but we had some biologists on board and they brought microscopes. And so they took some of the sediment, rinsed it a little bit, and they looked under a microscope and they found glass balls. They found diatoms, which are plankton that live in the surface of the ocean. And when they die, they sink down to the bottom of the ocean. And so what this core is, it's some regular ocean sediment and mud, but it's also these teeny tiny diatom shells, glass shells. So that's why it has the lighter color. That's why it has the fluffy texture. That's why it looks so
Very
different
cool.
than this one, which is just regular mud. But this one has something different going on.
I want to put something in context for our kids as well, because diatoms, first of all, everyone should look them up. They're really cool. They're like the little gems of the ocean and really, really tiny. But so much of the landscape on Earth, like if you look at a chalk cliff, that's all made of things that used to live in the ocean. If you look at things in the seafloor and how it develops over time, like it's literally like billions and billions of the carcasses of little tiny things that help make rocks and sediments and all sorts of cool things that we sort of see and you're like, oh, that's cool. But if you understand how it's made, same with oil and gas on the seafloor, like just really, really neat stuff is going on geologically to make some of these features. So very cool. Thank you so much. And then
things we want to show you.
Please, yeah.
One of the tools we use is a CT scanner. And this is a similar tool that you might find in a doctor's office. If you needed a CT scan of your body, we actually have a special CT scanner that is just for these sediment cores. And so before we cut them open, we do a CT scan and we get to look at the density layers. So you can see some like pink and purple, and especially in this one, that bright yellow at the bottom. So the layer at the bottom could be more dense than the layer at the top. And so sometimes the core, when we split it, like this one doesn't look like it has a lot going on. It looks very similar. But we might, in the CT data, see something that tells us otherwise. It might look really different. And
yes, it has at least one layer that's a bit darker. And for those the volcanics question, in this core that had the really cool, these are darker layers. So maybe we're seeing in density space that the denser layers are also darker and might also be volcanic. So we have a couple different clues we can use to understand what was happening over time.
And when we're done with these cores, so we're going to be busy in the lab today. We're going to do some more subsampling, collect some more data, but we have some leftovers here, right? We have some extra material. What we're going to do with that extra material is we're going to put it in our library. And we call it a library because just like you can check out a book, you can check out sediment cores from a library.
I'm coming. I've got my card handy.
So we're going to peek inside. That room is a giant refrigerator, and on the left are a bunch of shelves, and on the shelves are a bunch of tubes of sediment. And so at the end of the day today, whatever leftovers we have, we're going to seal them up in this plastic wrap. So this is a core that's in shrink wrap. We're going to put it through a hot machine to seal that wrap so we can keep this core nice. And then it's ready to go into the library. So we're going to put it in one of these storage tubes. And we're going to label it, kind of catalog it like you would a library book. And then this tube is going to go on the shelf. And when we share this data and we share this information with the public, another scientist might see it and think, wow, I want to know more about those diatoms in the sediment. Can you send me a sample? Then we can go into our library, we can pull out this big tube, and we can invite the scientist in, or we can send them a sample. And that's a way that we can keep sharing data and generating more data from these samples.
I want to stress this too. We've done a few museum programs recently, like the scale of things where we've collected things over time and we still have them available for research in libraries like this, in museums around the world, universities and what have you, is just tremendous. Like there's so much that we've never really gone back and explored. Scientists like these two could spend their entire lives literally just looking back at cores that have been taken on past expeditions very, very easily. Like thousands of scientists could do that. So it's exciting to know that we're doing new stuff, but also amazing to think of what exists in places like this, that there's so much more to be discovered as we even develop new technologies for understanding those mysteries. So really appreciate the context, you two. Is there anything else you want to take us to, or can we dive in with round 2 of questions before we wrap up together?
We're ready for round 2.
Yes. Well, I'm going to start with the ever enthusiastic Levi to kick us off, and then we'll dive in with more. YouTubers, please feel free to share. We've got Texas, Oregon, New York, all sorts of cool folks, Nicaragua. So keep those coming. But North Carolina, come on in, take us away. Hey.
Hi.
So, your question?
So we have this cool guy, and we're wondering, I think you mentioned you don't typically find lots of fossils or anything, but Levi and I find cool stuff on the beach all the time, and we're wondering if you've come across any cool artifacts like that in the big, the box cube, and how you're able to work with partners to age it and figure out how old something is. Like, what is that technology like?
I have 2 very cool examples. Was that a megalodon tooth? I was trying to see.
Yes.
Cool.
I actually was on an expedition offshore of Brazil. It was my first research cruise that I ever went on. I worked with some researchers at the University of Sao Paulo and some USGS researchers, and we were dredging, which is taking a big metal box about the size of my body and just scraping it along and seeing what you find. Sounds kind of destructive, but the footprint is quite small, usually for the spaces we're working in. But we actually also pulled up a megalodon tooth. So I have found one even about 2,000 meters or, down to the seafloor. But a very cool intersection of minerals and fossils was actually, we worked with some researchers from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, MBARI. Maybe they've done some calls with this program before. They were working on seamounts, so underwater mountains just offshore of California, a little bit south of Monterey Bay. And they were going along looking for actually octopuses and jellyfish in the water column. So they were near the upper portions of these seamounts. And they were going along with a remotely operated vehicle where they had live video feed of the seafloor. And they actually saw this long structure that looked like a mammoth tusk. And it actually was a mammoth tusk. And normally I wouldn't get the opportunity to work on something like that, except for on the surface of this mammoth tusk that had been there for around, tens of thousands of years. It was growing some of this ferromanganese mineral on the surface. So the scientists very carefully picked it up with the robot arms and brought it back on the vehicle. And they actually worked on dating that fossil in two ways. First, they were able to scrape a little bit of the bone material itself from the tusk, and they were able to use uranium isotopes and ancient DNA techniques to figure out what kind of mammoth it was, so what point of time it would have likely been alive, and then the uranium isotopes gave them also a date. But then to back that up, they also used uranium thorium isotopes of the ferromanganese crust that was growing. They could figure out it was growing about 20 millimeters per million years, and they could track it back that way. And they figured out exactly what kind of mammoth it was, and that it had probably died somewhere onshore in California or Oregon region, and then actually flowed out through a river and been deposited on the seamount. So that was an example of a very cool time that that's like, mammals on Earth that we know ending up in the ocean. But like we talked about with sediments, technically a lot of those things are fossils. The diatoms that we have in our core, those are also fossils of plankton living on the surface, getting buried and being preserved over time. So those are actually also fossils of plankton. So there's a couple of examples, but the mammoth tusk one was pretty cool.
Pretty special. Also, I also have a megalodon tooth. You've got a megalodon. Everybody's got short teeth. Oh, very fun. Great questions in the chat too. Geez, time flies and you're having fun. So we are nearing the end of the broadcast. We're going to take just a couple more questions. But when we wrap up, we'll make sure to pass along some extra resources to keep the learning going, highlight all these things for anyone who's keen to follow along. There's a whole expedition recap page about this. That's a big unwieldy URL that I will put in the chat for everyone. But Mrs. Connor's class wants to know, is there anything that is harvested from the sea bottom? Like, are you using it for commercial purposes, or is it for research only when you're on a USGS expedition?
That's a really great question. So USGS stands for the U.S. Geological Survey. So for folks who don't know, we are a federal science agency. And we're really lucky in that we work for an agency that our whole job is just to do science. We don't have any policy arm, so we don't set regulations. We don't set policy, unlike maybe the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration or some of the other government agencies. So our work is strictly for research. The USGS studies resources and hazards and anything basically to do with the science of U.S. territory. But a lot of USGS work honestly is global. We're seen as sort of a good world partner. So our research, when we're looking at minerals, there is an aspect of our research that involves what kinds of metals are concentrated in them, and certain folks working at USGS do focus on economic geology and where there might be new mineral deposits that we could use for mining. But nobody at USGS is doing mining or working for mining companies. So it's just public available information, but all the work we do is interdisciplinary, looking at the setting, the environmental setting, all of the earth science that goes around minerals and how they form. So great question. They're sort of related, but luckily we are just science.
Just science.
We're to play in the mud.
Yeah, playing in the mud is the best. And I want to stress for anyone who is keen on deep sea mining, like this is a huge issue now that's being talked about a lot. A lot of world governments are coming together to set sort of ground rules for this. But it's changing a lot as we speak. So if you're keen on this, lots to explore online. I can't encourage you to do that enough, but we're having more fun here just talking about the science, so it's better anyway. A great question from Caesar, and we've actually done a program on exactly this question before, but if one of your things you send down, a robot or a box core or anything, falls off, do you go get it at the bottom of the ocean? Can you go get it, or is it lost to time forever?
That's a really good question. I think if the box core fell off on this expedition, we would not have the tools to go down and find it and get it, and we probably would never get it back. Usually those types of things are really hard to recover, and the expense and the effort to go out and recover something from the deep ocean is usually greater than the value of the actual tool. So sometimes tools like this get lost in the bottom of the ocean, and they're going to be in the sediment record. We're not going to get them back.
And we always have to bring some backups. So we plan for that. I mean, working in multiple miles of water is really difficult. And we did have some things malfunction on the ship. Like we had a deep sea camera that was taking images of where the box core was taking a sample. And after 6 cores, it stopped functioning. So that you're right that that's an issue. But there are, unless it's a really valuable piece of equipment, there have been expeditions where remotely operated vehicles, these really complicated, expensive robots that we can use live video feed, and they have manipulator arms. They're usually that level of investment in that equipment. People do go and do rescue missions, but there's been a few that have just stayed at the seafloor. So great question.
We usually work, this cruise, we were 200 miles offshore, but we're usually even farther offshore than that. Yeah. So if something breaks, we can't go to the hardware store and get a new part. We can't go pick up a new piece. So we do a lot of work packing and planning and thinking about all these different scenarios and things that can go wrong. We're going to make sure we bring the tools to fix it.
Our Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants audience, like people are mentioning it in the chat, like we've dealt with people at the poles, we've dealt with astronauts before, deep sea expeditions, like they're very, very similar in the prep, how people are trained going into it, the sort of accommodations that are made to make it as exciting as possible. Because when you're on an expedition for like a month or many months, and all of those examples, it's a long way from home. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of work. Sometimes you're up late at night and you have the machines that can't fail. And there's a lot of prep to make sure that everything is looked after in the best way possible. And if there is a problem, people aren't likely to get hurt or stranded or anything else. And so I really love when we get these questions. Just, you guys have been an amazing audience today. Thank you so much for all this. Before we wrap up and say farewell, is there any final message you want to leave us with about this super cool expedition? This has been so much fun getting to hang out with you both today.
That's a great question. I think just the deep sea is a really cool space. Like you've mentioned, there's a lot of current questions about the deep sea. What kind of resources are there? What kind of role does it play in carbon sequestration? So as much as we love the shallow oceans where we as humans get to play, keep your mind curious about the deep, dark spaces that actually, I think Katlin looked up a really cool stat today.
Yeah, I think we often talk about or learn about that most of the surface of our planet is ocean. If you look at a globe, it's mostly blue, right? It's mostly ocean. But I want to challenge you to think deep. And it's not just the surface of the ocean, but the ocean is, oh yeah, there's the globe right there. It's mostly blue. But now think about how deep it is. So thousands of meters, up to almost 7 miles of water. So when you think about both dimensions, about 66% of our planet is the deep ocean. And it's cold and it's dark and there are amazing animals. There are these amazing rocks and sediment cores. We've explored, I think, 0.001% of the deep ocean. So if you're looking for a new frontier to explore, go to the deep sea. We got a lot of work to do.
I love this geology perspective for our audience that's really keen on the animals. I really encourage you to check out our YouTube channel for Diva Amon. She's an amazing biologist, done some really, really cool stuff in the deep. But like, there's a reason that we keep coming back to feature stories in this, because it's the biggest ecosystem on Earth. There's so much that we have to discover. We know way more about the moon and Mars than we do about our deep seas. And there's so many cool research expeditions. They're private, public, all over the planet. They're going out to explore. So again, golden age. So nice to get to hang out with you both. And thank you for your passion, expertise, all of it. We're going to say farewell. If you're on YouTube and you want to scream and yell and annoy the principal, you have our permission. But our Carrie class, La Vie, if you want to join us in saying goodbye, thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Bye.